Welcome to Sonoran Wargaming. Today we're going to talk about how to make foam rocks out of canned foam that you can get in your local big box stores. So I've already poured the foam rocks that we're going to be working with. Here you see two of the sections that I poured. They turn out to be nice little piles of foam, anywhere from 1 to 2 to maybe 3 inches tall, depending on how they've come out. But they all come out, I've had, in my experience, they all have a bottom that is pretty protruding. It's not very flat at all. So I had to take a tool. In this case, I'm using this little saw, and I'm cutting off the bottoms so that they don't wiggle around and so that they're nice and flat. This works really well to do this. It does make a bit of a mess, but as far as cutting the foam, it does an excellent job. And I'd recommend it as a way to go for a cheap method to make flat surfaces in your foam. So here you can see now I've flattened out both sections, but I want to put the second one on top of the first one. So what I'm going to have to do is take the foam and I'm going to cut a flat surface on the other side of the foam here. So you see I'm cutting a bit, and I was thinking, well, maybe I can make it a little off center and have a nice little look, but it just didn't look right. So I went ahead and completed making a flat surface all the way along the top of this one rock. So once that's done, then I have a nice place to attach my second rock face to. And this then develops a nice rock to start with. It's a very good base, and it gives me something to work with from this point on. Now what I have to do is take and glue the two pieces together. So I'm using Elmer's glue and also a super glue that's a gel type. This is one that I can use on foam and it won't eat through the foam, so that's a benefit of this. But I wanted to be able to get the foam connected quickly so I can continue to work on stuff for the day. So I put the super glue around the edges, and then I use the Elmer's glue primarily in the center, but then a nice ring around to give it a nice full connection. And I put them together and put some pressure on it. This particular glue takes about 30 seconds to dry, so I need to hold it for a little while for the connection to complete for the super glue, and then the PVA glue will just continue to dry over the next couple days because it actually takes a little while to dry in the foam like this. So that's the end of this section, and what happens then, I get a rock something like this. But I need to go ahead and cut all the shiny surfaces off. These surfaces will not allow me to paint very easily. If I want to do any kind of designs in the rock, I need to do that now. I actually do that while I'm cutting off this shiny surface. Putting in some grooves like this so that it looks a little bit more natural as we go on. And I just keep on cutting, and it's sort of like peeling an apple. You have all these different areas to do. And I just, there's a lot to cut through. And you can see I had to glue my rock on a little bit better. It didn't stick quite the way I wanted it to, so I just grabbed it and put some more PVA glue on there. But we're cutting through, peeling off the edges, shaping the rock as I go, and just making this into a nice little wargaming rock. Now, in order for it to be a wargaming rock, typically I make a flat surface so that the miniatures can stand on top of the rock. So that gives them a surface where they can stand. In this case, it's probably only going to be good enough for one, but a lot of times I like more than one. So once I've done with the shaping of the rock, I'm going to go in with some sandpaper and I smooth out the rough edges, and I also take and pick out and make more areas. I redefine the look of the rock some so that it doesn't look so smooth and unnatural. this extra little picking of the foam out of here adds a little bit of natural look. And because this is a softer foam, I can do the picking pretty well. If I was using the pink foam, it wouldn't work very well like this. So I pick some of that out, then I sand it so it's smoother so you can't see the different holes that I pulled out. It makes for a nice little surface there. And I'll go ahead and keep doing that, sanding and picking out pieces until I'm satisfied with how this rock looks. So sometimes it can go fairly quickly, and other times it takes quite a while to figure out my look. Sorry about the table moving. I didn't realize that my table was moving so much as I did the sanding. I think that's the only time that I really noticed it too much. But here you can see that I'm still forming the rock, putting in some little natural indentations that you would see. And also you see that there's some pieces of the foam that are sticking out. I need to be sure to take all those pieces off. Otherwise, when I do the next coating, it's going to get in the way. So here's my completed rock. I've done my sanding, I've picked out pieces, I've smoothed it out, and that's the rock that I'm going to use to do my painting. So before I go into the painting part, I need to add a base. Here I have my rock on my foam board, and I'm just going to cut out a piece that I can use. I'll cut it out larger than I want, and then take it and form it around my rock a little bit. Yeah, this one I'm doing fairly large. I decided I wanted to have a base on this one that's at least 1 inch all around. So I made a pretty good size cutout for this one. So here you can see that it's at least 1 inch around. I need to sort of look to see where the best arrangement is for the rock to go. And then once I have that decided, then I need to go ahead and get my knife out, and I need to go ahead and bevel the edges. So there I go. I'm starting to bevel my edges. I try not to make too big of a bevel, because when I do too big of a bevel, especially on the foam board, it can get a little bit thin on the edges, and then for playing time, you'll have a less resilient base. Here I go and going to continue beveling, and here's a place where I did a little bit of an error. I cut too big of a bevel right there, and there's only paper at the bottom, so I need to cut that off. I don't want to have just paper showing. I want to have paper and foam board so that they are working together to make a stronger surface. So I need to cut that out and then continue to bevel. Sometimes if you lengthen the knife a little bit, it'll bevel a little bit nicer. This is a little bit bigger bevel than I usually like to have, but since I'm using a big base, it's working okay. So I'm continuing to go around to make my bevel. You just have to go all the way around the base, complete the bevel, and if there's places where you bevel a little bit too deeply and it's just paper, then you have to either cut it out, or sometimes I'll just go ahead and use a sandpaper and sand the pieces off. And you do have to sand it anyway. So at this stage, I am sanding the top level of paper so it smooths down with the foam board, the foam inside of the foam board. So that way there's a nice smooth layer, and you don't see the 3 distinct layers of the foam board, being the top layer of paper, the center foam, and the bottom paper. You want them to all sort of look like one big piece. So there we go. That's my foam board. It's all ready to go. So the next stage is I'm going to take my piece and I'm going to go ahead and glue it on there. So again, I'm taking the Elmer's glue or PVA glue, and I'm using my super glue, quick dry super glue, so that I can continue working fairly quickly with my product. So here I am. I'm off camera just a little bit. I didn't realize I was that far off camera. I'm putting on my glue. I put a nice ring around the rock, and then I will add the super glue afterwards in this case. So I'm continuing to put the glue on. The glue is a little sticky to there. It's not coming out very fast. So I'm going to have to do something about that so I can get my glue out faster. But here's my super glue going on. I'm putting that around. And once my super glue is on, then I'm going to connect it to my base. And then it'll take about 30 seconds for it to fully connect to the base. And that's my rock with the base. Here's my rock in its finished designed format. I now have to go ahead and cover it up. So the first coat I put on is a coat of joint compound. What I've done is I've watered it down quite a bit, as you can see. And I like using a brush to put my joint compound on. This then fills in the holes, especially with this kind of foam. There's quite a few holes that are left over. So I need to cover it with something, and I found that, like a lot of other train makers, the joint compound or filler works very good for this. There's different places where I'll actually have to get a thicker layer of it and use my fingers to put it into the holes. But overall, I try to use the brush as much as I can, because I like the way that the brush leaves the lines in the rock. This actually gives it a nice little version of striations. And here you can see that I'm putting in some of the thicker filler with my fingers just to fill in some of the bigger holes that are left over. But then as I go over with the brush again, just to smooth it out and make it look like a complete rock. So I continue going through this over again, all the way around. I like to cover the full rock, not with a really thick layer of filler, but with enough filler that the foam is fully covered. And that gives a nice look that this then looks more like a rock versus some foam that's been painted or something like that. This provides a very nice look to the final product. So I just keep on going, keep on getting the holes filled in, keep on wiping on more with a brush. It just takes a while to complete. So here I am just putting more and more on. I wanted to show you a fair bit, because sometimes when I look at a video, someone tells me that they do something, but they just show me a few seconds of it, and I think, well, how is it done? How do they really do it? Well, so this is how I really do this when I put the filler on my rocks. So now I'm going to go over to the next phase, which is put in the grit. My rock is now dried for over 24 hours. I like to make sure that they're nice and dry. Then I am going to take a watered down PVA. I brush it on in the different locations that I want to put my grit, and I just keep on going around the rock. I make a nice bottom with this fine sand. I live in the Sonoran Desert, so in the desert we have plenty of grit and rock and sand, so I am able to get most of my products from my backyard for this. I clean it up and make sure that it's all in good shape for anybody that's going to use my products afterwards. But I just get it right here in the desert. And it's as natural as you can come by. And here I place some PVA, and then I put my sand. Then I'm going to put a regular coat of PVA and put in some of my larger rocks. Wish I hadn't hidden this from your view, where you could actually see what I was doing. You can barely see the rock in this case. But I just keep going around. There you go. You can see the piece that I filled in. I have some larger pieces. First of all, I put the base coat of the sand. Then I put a little bit larger pieces, and then I grabbed the largest pieces that were there, and I made a nice filling in that area. Not that it filled up the whole complete hole, but it gave it a nice area where rock would be falling down by natural means. And I'm just continuing to go around in all the different holes, all the different crevices in this rock and filling them in. I found that when I put more on like this, I get a nicer looking final product. I built it where there's just a small amount of grit, very few pieces. And I made it where the grit is all one size. I've also made it where it's all larger, but none of them really look as good as when I put a combination of large, small, medium, put it all around, find as many good places as I can. There needs to be at least 6 or 7 places around the rock that you put this to give it a nice balanced look. Typically when you're working on something in nature, you want to have an odd number of areas. So like if I'm doing these areas, I'll have like 3, 7, 9 different areas that I'll be adding the rock to. When you start using the even numbers, you don't get quite as nice a look. I learned this when I became a floral designer, and have added that into my work since then. So there's my final rock. It's getting ready for the next coat, but this is what you're going to have, and we're going to let it sit overnight and dry again. So there's several drying periods. So once it's set overnight and dried, it comes to the Mod Podge phase. And here's where I take a mixture of Mod Podge and black paint. I learned this from the Black Magic craft show that's on YouTube. I saw him doing this and I really liked what he does. So I decided I was going to try it, and from the first time I did it, I really have liked adding this Mod Podge at this point. Previous to this, I was waiting till the very end to put on my sealer. But when I place this black version of Mod Podge at this point, what it does is it really seals down the rock very nicely. Because I was always having trouble with my dry brushing, because it would sort of take my rock and stuff off because I hadn't sealed yet by that time. But here, when I seal at this point, it makes my rock much more durable. I mean, not just the rock that I'm building, but also the rock that's been glued on with the PVA glue. I mean, it soaks into there. It helps the whole product become more durable because we're making these to play with, to play on the board, to put on the board, and they get a lot of wear and tear. Where I play, we have to bring our stuff every Saturday to the location, and we all bring our stuff and bring it out and then tear it down and take it home. So this just makes a much better product when you have a layer like this that seals it before you continue to the rest of the product. And here I am getting close to it. One thing, when I'm doing this, I will put a little heavier layer on the ground, on sand, because I don't want to run my brush over it multiple times, because this is still water based, it's PVA based. So if I reactivate the glue, then I could have an issue. So there's my final product for the Mod Podge phase. Sort of looks oily at this point, but it dries out to have a very nice consistency. Once that's completed, I paint a base coat of dark gray, and here then, after the dark gray has dried overnight, I go and do the dry brushing. I usually like to have at least 4 colors, maybe 5. And I start with a dark gray, And that goes on pretty heavy overall because it sort of gets the gray that I've used as my base coat. It actually sort of mutes that a little bit because my base coat was a little shiny. Now this takes a little bit of the shininess out. Then I take the brownish color and I'm doing still a fairly heavy coat. You can see here that I'm getting the edges, and I'm actually also getting down into some of the crevices with this brown. It gives the rock a nice little add of color so that it's not just a totally gray rock. But I like to use this rock. So I start with the dark gray, then I go to the dark brown, or it's actually more of a dark tan color. It has a little bit of reddish in there. But we have nice red rocks here in Arizona, so I like to add that reddish color in with it. And that's going on now. And you can see again that it's hitting the highlights and going into some of the crevices, but not as much as that first gray color that I had. So I'm just continuing on with that. And shortly, I'm going to be changing my color again. But I got to, first of all, get all over the rock, usually a couple times around to get a pretty good coating on it. And when I run out of paint in my brush, I don't always go back to the dish. A lot of times I'm going to go to my paper towel where I've been wiping the paint off, because then I can still get color, but I don't have to do as much wiping off of the paint as if I was going back to the dish all the time. So now I'm getting my light gray, but you can see here I'm not just getting the light gray, but I'm mixing it in slightly with the brownish color that I had. These mixtures really add to the final look, because it's not just, you know, the brown, not just the gray or the light gray that we're looking at. We're looking at that mixture of colors which happens in nature. So that's what I'm trying to get, is that mixture showing through. You know, there's some places where you see the nice dark gray showing up all the way. Then you see the brownish color. Then you see the light gray. Not as much of the light gray because I've mixed it pretty much with the other colors. But I want to get all the way around with this. And this is not as heavy of a coat, but there's parts that I haven't hit yet before. So I wanted to hit those. Now the final color is my little light tan. So I'm going to take the light tan and mix it up a little bit with that gray and light brown or darker brown, and put them on here. But now I'm just hitting the highlights. I'm trying not to get any except on the highlights of the rock. So this gives the final pop to this system. And there, if you look, you can see those lines are showing up, and that's giving some pop to the rock. So that's just the final touch that the rock will get, so that it looks nice and, you know, as real as a wargaming rock is. In our wargaming world, we don't have the most real images, but we like to have something like this. It looks decent and provides coverage and gives a good look. So that's it for this show, and thank you for tuning in. Well, that completes tonight's tutorial on building a foam rock that you've created out of the canned foam. Thank you for your time. I hope this video has been helpful to you. I look forward to bringing you many more videos about building wargaming terrain.